The boy watched the doctor kill a man, and nobody knew he understood every word. For 6 years, Charleston's most powerful men murdered and stole while a deaf slave stood in their rooms pouring brandy. They thought he was furniture. They were wrong. And by the time they realized their mistake, it was already too late. March 1838, Charleston, South Carolina. Dr. Marcus Hartwell's bedroom on Meeting Street, 3 a.m. Edward Beaumont lay unconscious in the bed, his face the color of old paper, sweat soaking through his nightshirt despite the cool air. His chest rose and fell in shallow gasps that rattled like pebbles in a tin cup. Dr. Hartwell stood beside him, holding a lancet in one hand and a porcelain bowl in the other. Standing against the wall with a tray of clean bandages was an 8-year-old boy named Elias. Deaf, mute, invisible. Hartwell pressed the blade against Beaumont's wrist. The skin parted easily. Blood welled up dark and thick, dripping into the bowl with soft plinking sounds Elias could not hear but could see in the liquid surface. Hartwell counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 15 drops, 20, 30. Then he took a small glass vial from his vest pocket, pulled the cork with his teeth, and tilted 3 drops of clear liquid into the bowl. His lips moved. Digitalis and arsenic. Beautiful combination. Stops the heart, but looks exactly like cardiac failure from bloodletting. No one ever questions a physician's treatment. Hartwell dipped a cloth in the poisoned blood and pressed it against Beaumont's wrist, letting the mixture seep back into the open wound. Beaumont's body twitched, his mouth opened. A thin line of foam appeared at the corner of his lips. His skin turned from pale to gray. His fingers curled inward like spider legs. The rattling breathing stopped. Hartwell watched for 30 seconds, then checked for a pulse. Nothing. He turned to Elias and spoke loudly, clearly, the way people spoke to the deaf. "Bring me the death certificate forms from my desk." Elias stared at him blankly. Hartwell repeated himself using exaggerated gestures. Point at Elias. Point at the door. Motion of writing. Elias finally nodded and left the room. In the hallway, Elias allowed himself one moment. He pressed his back against the wall and closed his eyes. He had just watched a murder, seen every detail, understood every word Hartwell muttered, because Elias was not as deaf as everyone believed. Or rather, he was completely deaf, had been since scarlet fever destroyed his hearing when he was 8 years old. But what no one knew was that Elias could read lips. Perfectly. Every word, every conversation. And for the past 3 months since Dr. Hartwell bought him for $1 at auction, Elias had been learning that Charleston's most respected physician was also Charleston's most prolific killer. But we need to go back further. To understand how a deaf child became the most dangerous person in the city, you need to know what happened before Dr. Hartwell. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from and what time it is where you are. This story gets darker, and you will want to follow this channel for more buried histories. Now let me tell you about the woman who taught Elias how to see through silence. 2 years before Edward Beaumont's murder. A plantation 30 miles outside Charleston. Elias was 14 years old and had been deaf for 6 years. He worked in the main house carrying water, cleaning floors, doing tasks that required no complex instructions. The plantation owner considered him barely functional, useful only for the simplest labor. Then an elderly woman named Ruth arrived. She had been sold after her previous master died. She was nearly 70, too old for field work, assigned to kitchen duties where she could sit and peel vegetables. Ruth noticed Elias immediately. She watched him for 3 weeks, saw how he observed people, how his eyes followed conversations even though he could not hear them, how he anticipated what people wanted before they finished giving orders. One evening she approached him in the servants' quarters. She stood directly in front of him where he could see her face clearly. She spoke slowly, deliberately. "You can understand me, cannot you?" Elias stared at her. Ruth continued, "I see you watching mouths when people talk. I know because I do the same thing. My hearing is almost gone. I taught myself to read lips 20 years ago. You have done it too. I can teach you to do it better." For the next 18 months, Ruth educated Elias. She taught him how every sound had a corresponding mouth shape, how B and P and M looked similar but could be distinguished by context, how to watch the full face, not just the lips, because eyes and eyebrows and jaw movements all contributed to meaning, how to hide what you understood so people continued treating you as harmless. Ruth had survived 30 years of slavery by appearing less intelligent than she was. She passed that survival skill to Elias. Ruth died in January 1838, pneumonia that turned into something worse. Her last words to Elias, formed carefully so he could read them even as she struggled for breath. "They will sell you soon. The master needs money. Go somewhere with powerful men, men with secrets. Watch them, learn their secrets, use them." 3 days later, she was buried in the slave cemetery behind the tobacco barn. 1 week after that, Elias was taken to Charleston and put on the auction block. 7 different men bought Elias over the next 8 weeks. 7 different men returned him as defective. A deaf slave was useless, could not follow orders, could not be trained, could not communicate. The auctioneers started calling him problem merchandise. Then on March 7, 1838, Dr. Marcus Hartwell attended the auction, not looking for labor, looking for something very specific. When Elias was brought forward, the auctioneer did not even try a proper sale. Male, approximately 16 years old, deaf and mute, sold as is. Starting bid $5. No hands, $3. Nothing, $1. Hartwell raised his hand. Sold. In the carriage ride to the Hartwell mansion, Elias learned what he had been purchased for. Hartwell did not speak to him or look at him directly. But Hartwell did speak to himself, the way people often do when they believe no one is listening. Perfect, completely deaf, no possibility of testimony. I can discuss anything in front of him. More secure than locked doors, more reliable than coded messages. This solves everything. Elias watched Hartwell's lips form every word. He understood. He had not been bought to work. He had been bought to be deaf, to be a living piece of furniture that could stand in rooms where terrible things were discussed. That first night, Hartwell hosted a dinner. 5 guests. After the meal, the men retired to the study, while the women moved to the parlor. Elias served brandy. He stood in the corner holding a tray, and the men talked. Thomas Wickham, a lawyer with nervous hands that constantly fidgeted with his beard, spoke first. "Marcus, we need to finalize the Beaumont situation. Edward is asking too many questions. His brother left him nothing in the will, and he knows that is irregular." Hartwell lit a cigar, took his time with the answer. "I have been treating Edward for heart palpitations. Real ones, actually. Useful condition. I am adjusting his medication to exacerbate the symptoms. Give it 2 more weeks, and nature will take its course." Charles Ashford laughed, a wet sound from deep in his throat. He was a heavy man who sweated constantly, even in cool weather. "Nature. Very delicate, Marcus. How many does this make?" Hartwell shrugged. Edward will be number 6, each one documented as natural causes, each one leaving property available at advantageous prices. Samuel Preston, bald with soft hands that had never done physical labor, added his thoughts. The medical profession provides remarkable opportunities. People trust physicians, trust them with their bodies, their secrets, their deaths. As long as the deaths appear natural and are spaced properly apart, no pattern emerges. The 5th man, Jonathan Vanderholm, had white hair and pale blue eyes that never seemed to blink. He looked at Elias. "Are we certain about this one? Discussing such matters in front of a servant?" Hartwell waved dismissively. "The boy is deaf and mute. I had 3 different physicians examine him. Complete bilateral hearing loss, no speech capability. He understands nothing. He might as well be a dog. Less intelligent, actually. Dogs can learn commands." Wickham walked over to Elias. He clapped his hands directly in front of Elias's face. No reaction. He snapped his fingers next to Elias's ear. Nothing. He turned back to the others. "If you say so, Marcus. But if this becomes a problem, it is your neck in the noose, not ours." They continued for 2 more hours. Elias learned everything. These 5 men had been working together for nearly a decade. They had murdered at least 6 people for financial gain. They had stolen property through forged legal documents. They had bankrupted families through manipulated loans. They had sabotaged business rivals through destroyed shipments. Every crime planned carefully. Every crime discussed openly, because they believed the deaf boy in the corner was nothing more than furniture. 3 days later, Hartwell brought Elias to Edward Beaumont's house. Beaumont was bedridden with what Hartwell had diagnosed as acute heart disease. Hartwell needed an assistant to carry medical supplies. Elias stood beside the bed, holding instruments while Hartwell worked. Beaumont was conscious but weak, his face slick with sweat, his breathing labored. Hartwell prepared a syringe. He held it up to the light, tapped the glass to remove air bubbles, spoke to himself. 30 milligrams of laudanum for the pain, and 5 milligrams of something else for the cure. He filled the syringe from 2 different vials. Then he injected the mixture into Beaumont's arm. Beaumont's eyes rolled back. His body relaxed. Hartwell checked his pulse. Still strong. Good. Needs to last until tonight so I can be present when it happens. They returned that evening. Beaumont's wife greeted them at the door, frantic. He collapsed an hour ago. Can barely breathe. Hartwell rushed to the bedroom. Elias followed, carrying the medical bag. What happened next was a performance. Hartwell checked Beaumont's pulse, listened to his heart, administered what appeared to be medicine. He worked for 15 minutes, trying everything a skilled physician would try. Then he stopped, stepped back, shook his head. "I am sorry. His heart has given out. There was nothing more I could do." Beaumont's wife collapsed sobbing. Hartwell comforted her, professional and kind. These things happen. His condition was severe. You should take comfort knowing he was under excellent care and did not suffer. But Beaumont had suffered. Elias had watched his face during those final minutes, watched his eyes bulge as his heart struggled against the poison, watched his mouth open in a silent scream he could not voice because his muscles would not respond, watched his fingers claw at the bedsheets. Hartwell had murdered him slowly, deliberately, while appearing to provide medical care. And the only witness who understood what happened was a 16-year-old deaf boy that everyone believed was too stupid to comprehend. The next morning, Elias stole paper and ink from Hartwell's desk. That night in his small room near the kitchen, he began teaching himself to write. He had never learned letters. The fever struck before he reached that age, so he started from nothing. He looked at words on papers he had stolen. He copied the shapes, connected them to words he read on people's lips. It took him 3 months to write his first complete sentence. The doctor killed Edward Beaumont with poison on March 10th in the year 1838. I watched him do it. By November of 1838, Elias had documented his second murder. A merchant named Robert Chen. Chen had filed a lawsuit against Jonathan Vanderholm, claiming Vanderholm's shipping company destroyed cargo deliberately. The lawsuit had merit. If it proceeded, it might expose other frauds. So Chen had to die. But Chen was healthy. No medical conditions to exploit. They used a different method. Samuel Preston invited Chen to dinner. Afterward, they retired to the study. Elias served brandy from a crystal decanter. Preston and Chen talked for an hour about business and politics. Then Preston offered Chen a final drink. Chen accepted. Preston turned his back while pouring, his body blocking Chen's view. But Elias stood in the corner. He saw Preston add powder to the glass, saw his lips move. Strychnine. 12 minutes to take effect. Fast acting, but looks like a stroke if the dose is correct. Preston handed Chen the glass. Chen drank it. Thanked Preston for the hospitality. Stood to leave. He made it 3 steps before his legs buckled. Preston caught him, helped him to a chair. Chen tried to speak, but his words came out slurred and broken. His eyes went wide with panic. Preston watched him with clinical interest. Fascinating how the nervous system shuts down. The conscious mind remains aware, but the body stops responding. Must be terrifying. Chen's mouth opened and closed. His hands trembled. White foam began seeping from his lips. His back arched. His muscles locked rigid. Then he stopped moving entirely. Preston knelt beside the body and checked for a pulse. Nothing. He looked at Elias and shouted, "The gentleman has had a stroke. Fetch my medical bag immediately." Elias pretended not to understand. Preston repeated with exaggerated gestures. Elias finally nodded and left. He walked slowly down the hallway, giving Preston time. When he returned 5 minutes later with the bag, Preston was arranging Chen's body to look natural. Cerebral hemorrhage, he said to no one in particular. Sudden and catastrophic. Tragic but unavoidable at his age and stress level. The next morning, Preston reported the death to authorities. The coroner accepted his assessment without question. Dr. Samuel Preston was a respected physician. His word was sufficient. That night, Elias wrote everything down. The date, the method, the victim, the murderer. He was building a record. But to what purpose? Who would believe a deaf slave over Charleston's elite? Who would even listen? Elias needed something more than testimony. He needed leverage. He needed to understand not just what these men did, but how they were connected, what secrets bound them together, what vulnerabilities they possessed. So he watched and listened with his eyes and learned. The 5 conspirators met monthly at Hartwell's house. Elias was always present, always serving drinks, always standing silent in corners. He learned that Charles Ashford was having an affair with Margaret Preston, Samuel's wife. They met every Thursday afternoon while Samuel was at his medical practice. Elias knew because Hartwell joked about it one evening. "Charles, does your wife know you visit the Preston house when Samuel is away? Or does she believe you are conducting banking business?" Ashford's face reddened, but he laughed it off. "What Catherine does not know will not hurt her. Besides, Samuel provides certain pharmaceutical enhancements that make the meetings quite productive. Samuel Preston smiled. Laudanum has remarkable recreational applications when properly dosed. Margaret appreciates my pharmaceutical expertise. Elias learned that Thomas Wickham had gambling debts totaling $8,000 owed to men who broke legs when payments were late. Wickham mentioned it during a meeting. I need to accelerate some property transfers. My creditors are becoming impatient. Hartwell offered to help arrange a foreclosure on a valuable estate. Jonathan Vanderholm had an illegitimate son with a woman named Sarah Chen, sister of the merchant they had murdered. Vanderholm mentioned her during a conversation about the lawsuit. At least with Robert dead, his sister will stop threatening to expose our arrangement. Wickham pointed out the irony. You mean the arrangement where you promised her brother you would marry her before abandoning her with your child? That arrangement? Vanderholm's face went cold. Watch yourself, Thomas. These were the secrets that bound them. Each man knew enough to destroy the others. Each man was complicit in enough crimes that betrayal meant mutual destruction. They stayed allied, not from friendship, but from fear. And Elias was learning that fear was a weapon. But he needed one more thing. He needed to witness something so terrible, so personal, that it would give him the justification to destroy these men, not just legally, but morally. He got it in March 1840, exactly 2 years after Edward Beaumont's death. Dr. Hartwell's wife Eleanor was sick. She had been sick for months with a wasting illness that left her bedridden and thin. Hartwell attended to her personally, bringing her medicine every evening. One night Elias was cleaning the hallway outside Eleanor's bedroom when Hartwell emerged carrying an empty glass. He saw Elias and smiled. She is getting better. The new treatment is very effective. Give it another month, and she will be healthy enough to travel. Perhaps a trip to the mountains for fresh air. Elias watched Hartwell's lips carefully. He saw the truth behind the words. Give it another month, and she will be dead. Her family's inheritance will be mine, and my dear young Catherine, waiting so patiently in the house on Trad Street, will finally become Mrs. Hartwell. That night, Elias made his decision. He would destroy these men, all of them, not by revealing their crimes to authorities who might be corrupt or indifferent, not by testifying in court where his word meant nothing. He would turn them against each other, use their secrets as weapons, make them destroy themselves. It would take time. It would take patience. It would require becoming something he had never been, not just an observer, but an actor, not just a witness, but an executioner. And it would begin with making sure these men understood that the deaf boy they dismissed as furniture had been watching them, listening to them, documenting every crime, and was now ready to show them that invisibility was the deadliest weapon of all. Eleanor Hartwell took 6 months to die. Dr. Marcus Hartwell poisoned his wife slowly, methodically, increasing doses week by week, so her decline appeared natural. Elias watched it all, watched Eleanor's skin turn yellow, watched her hair fall out in clumps that the maids swept away each morning, watched her vomit blood into chamber pots while Hartwell stood beside the bed taking notes for his medical journal. And every night Hartwell administered the medicine that was killing her, 3 drops of arsenic mixed with laudanum, enough to cause agony, not enough to kill quickly. On the night Eleanor died, March 19, 1840, Elias was in the hallway cleaning floors when he heard Dr. Hartwell call for servants. He entered the bedroom. Eleanor lay in the bed, her mouth open in a final silent scream, her fingers frozen in claws that had torn holes in the bedsheet. Her eyes were still open, staring at the ceiling, red with burst blood vessels. Foam crusted at the corners of her lips. Hartwell stood beside her, checking for a pulse he knew was gone. Then he turned to the servants. "My wife has passed. Her illness finally overcame her. Prepare the body and send word to her family. Someone bring me brandy." The servants left. Hartwell thought he was alone, but Elias remained in the corner, motionless, forgotten. And he watched as Hartwell sat beside his dead wife and smiled. "You held on longer than I expected, Eleanor. 6 months. Impressive constitution. But the inheritance is worth every tedious evening spent listening to you whimper." Hartwell reached out and closed Eleanor's eyes with 2 fingers. "Your family's money combined with Catherine's youth. Perfect?" He leaned close to Eleanor's face, whispered directly into her dead ear. "I hope you suffered. You were always so pious, so judgmental about my methods. At least now you are useful." Something broke inside Elias in that moment. He had witnessed murders before, had seen men killed for profit, but watching Hartwell mock his wife's corpse ignited a rage Elias had kept buried for 2 years. His hands shook, his breathing quickened, and he made a decision. Dr. Marcus Hartwell would die last. Not first, last. Because Hartwell needed to watch everything he built collapse, needed to understand that the person destroying him was the deaf boy he had dismissed as furniture, and needed to suffer the way Eleanor suffered before the darkness finally took him. 3 nights after Eleanor's funeral, Elias began his war. The first target was Charles Ashford, not because Ashford was the worst of the 5 conspirators, but because Ashford was careless. He kept incriminating documents in his office, conducted an affair with Margaret Preston every Thursday at a house on Charleston's east side, and drank too much to notice when someone was watching. Elias had been watching for months. He knew Ashford's schedule, knew his habits, knew exactly when and where Ashford would be vulnerable. The office was in a building 3 blocks from Ashford's bank. Brick construction, 2 stories, with large windows facing the street. Elias arrived at midnight. The building was dark, the street empty except for 1 drunk sleeping in a doorway across the road. Elias moved to the rear alley. The back window was locked but not latched. He wedged a thin piece of metal between the frame and glass, lifted the latch, pushed the window open. The hinges creaked loud enough that Elias froze, listening for movement inside. Nothing. He climbed through. The office was pitch dark. Elias stood motionless, letting his eyes adjust. Slowly, shapes emerged from the blackness. Desk, chairs, filing cabinets, bookshelf. He moved to the desk and tried the drawers. The first 3 opened easily. Papers, pens, account ledgers showing legitimate banking transactions. The 4th drawer was locked. Elias pulled a bent wire from his pocket and worked the lock. 30 seconds. Click. The drawer slid open. Inside were the records Ashford never wanted anyone to see. Falsified loans, forged signatures, lists of properties seized through manufactured debts. Elias took 2 ledgers and 3 documents showing specific fraudulent foreclosures. He also found a leather pouch containing $400 in cash. He took half. Then he did something more dangerous. He left a note. Crude handwriting meant to disguise the source. "We know what you have done. We know about the false foreclosures and stolen money. We know about Margaret Preston. Pay us $5,000 or we expose everything. Instructions will follow. Tell your partners and we send proof to every newspaper in Charleston. You have 1 week." Elias placed the note in the drawer where Ashford would find it next time he opened his secret files. Then he turned to leave. That was when he heard the sound. Footsteps. On the stairs outside the office, someone climbing toward the second floor, toward this room. Elias looked at the window, 20 feet away. He would never reach it before whoever was climbing those stairs entered. He looked at the door, no other exit. He moved quickly to the side of the room and pressed himself against the wall behind a tall bookshelf. The footsteps reached the landing, stopped outside the door. A key scraped in the lock. The door opened. A man entered carrying a candle. Elias recognized him immediately. Peter Ashford, Charles's younger brother, who worked as a clerk at the bank. Peter walked to the desk and set the candle down. He opened drawers, searching for something. Found it in the third drawer, a folder containing documents. Peter carried the folder to the window to read by streetlight. His back was to Elias. This was Elias's chance. He could slip out while Peter's attention was elsewhere. He moved silently toward the door, but the floorboard creaked. Just one board. But in the silence of that dark office, the sound was like a gunshot. Peter spun around, saw Elias, his mouth open to shout. Elias had two choices: run and let Peter alert everyone that someone had broken into the office, or stop Peter from making noise. Elias chose. He covered the distance between them in 3 steps. Peter tried to scream. Elias grabbed Peter's throat with both hands and squeezed. Peter clawed at Elias's arms. His face turned red, then purple. His eyes bulged. Elias squeezed harder. Peter's struggles weakened. His hands dropped. His body went limp. Elias held on for 30 more seconds to be certain. Then he released. Peter Ashford collapsed to the floor, dead. Elias stood over the body, breathing hard. He had not planned this, had not wanted to kill anyone yet. But Peter had forced his hand. And now Elias faced a new problem. A dead body in Charles Ashford's office would bring immediate investigation. Police. Questions. Everything Elias had planned would be jeopardized. He needed to make this look like something else, not murder, something that would create confusion and suspicion. Elias dragged Peter's body to the desk, positioned him in the chair, made it look like Peter had been sitting there working. Then Elias searched Peter's pockets, found keys, coins, a watch, and a small vial. Elias opened the vial and smelled. Laudanum. Peter was an addict. Perfect. Elias poured the entire vial into Peter's mouth, forcing the liquid down his throat. Overdose. It would look like Peter came to the office late, took too much laudanum, and died. Tragic accident. People would ask why he was there so late, but they would find no evidence of an intruder. The window was closed. The locked drawer would appear untouched because Elias had already closed it with the note inside. But Elias went further. He opened the drawer again and removed half the cash he had planned to leave. He took more documents. He wanted Charles Ashford to discover that money and files were missing at the same time he discovered his brother dead. It would create paranoia. Make Charles wonder if Peter had been stealing from him. Make Charles suspect his own family. Elias arranged everything carefully, then left through the back window, closing it behind him. Peter Ashford's body was discovered the next morning by a cleaning woman. The coroner ruled death by laudanum overdose. Charles Ashford was devastated. He gave a tearful statement about his brother's struggles with addiction, how he had tried to help Peter overcome his dependence on medicine. The funeral was attended by all of Charleston society. 3 days later, Charles opened his locked drawer to retrieve documents for a business transaction. He found the blackmail note. And when he counted his cash fund, he realized $400 was missing. and when he reviewed his ledgers, he saw that several pages had been torn out. Someone had been in his office. On the same night, Peter died. Maybe before Peter arrived. Maybe after. Charles Ashford became convinced that Peter had discovered someone robbing the office, that Peter had confronted them, that Peter had been murdered and the overdose was staged. But he could not prove it, and he could not tell his partners without revealing the blackmail note which would expose his affair with Margaret and his secret record-keeping. So Charles Ashford kept silent, and the paranoia ate at him. And when he looked at his 4 partners during their next meeting, he wondered which one of them had killed his brother. But Elias was not finished. The next target was Samuel Preston. Preston was arrogant, believed his medical degree made him untouchable, kept detailed records of every crime he committed because he considered them professional achievements. Those records were stored in his medical office in a locked cabinet. Elias had observed the office for weeks, knew that Preston worked late every Tuesday and Thursday, knew that his assistant left at 6 in the evening, knew that Preston stayed until 10 reviewing cases and preparing for the next day's appointments. Thursday night, May 9th, 1840. Elias waited across the street from Preston's office. At 6:15, the assistant locked the front door and left. At 10:30, Preston extinguished most of the lamps, leaving one burning in the back examination room. But Preston did not leave. Elias waited. Midnight. Preston was still inside. 1 in the morning. Finally, at 1:45, Preston emerged, locked the door, and walked toward his home 6 blocks away. Elias watched him disappear into the darkness. Then Elias approached the office. The front door was solid oak with a heavy lock. Elias moved to the side of the building, found a window, locked. He tried the next window, also locked. The third window, facing the alley, was slightly open at the bottom. Preston had left it cracked for ventilation. Elias pushed it fully open and climbed inside. He was in the examination room. The lamp Preston had left burning provided enough light to see. Elias moved quickly to Preston's private office. The filing cabinet was against the far wall. He tried the drawers, all locked. He picked the top lock. Inside were patient files, legitimate cases. The second drawer opened to reveal Preston's real work. Lists of patients falsely diagnosed as insane. Lists of patients certified dead who were actually alive. And a leather journal documenting every person Preston had poisoned over the past 8 years. Names, dates, methods, doses, outcomes. 14 people, 14 murders, all documented in Preston's own handwriting. Elias took the journal. Then he did something that would terrify Preston more than theft. He left one of the pages behind, the page documenting the murder of Robert Chen, the merchant poisoned in 1838. Elias placed it on Preston's desk where Preston would find it immediately, with a note attached. "We have your journal. We know everything. If you want it back, it will cost you $10,000. If you tell your partners, we send the journal to the police." But Elias did not deliver Preston's journal to police. He delivered it to David Marsh, whose brother had been declared insane by Preston 5 years earlier and locked in an asylum. Marsh was a lawyer with connections. He had always suspected Preston falsified the diagnosis. Now he had proof. Elias left the journal on Marsh's doorstep with a note. "This belongs in court. Evidence of criminal fraud by Dr. Samuel Preston." Page 17 documents your brother's case. Show this to the authorities. Justice for all the victims. The note was unsigned. Marsh found it the next morning, and by afternoon, a warrant had been issued for Preston's arrest. Samuel Preston was taken into custody that evening. The charges were medical fraud, falsifying diagnoses, and conspiracy to commit theft. The evidence was Preston's own journal, his own handwriting, his own detailed documentation of crimes he thought no one would ever discover. Charleston society erupted. How could a respected physician commit such atrocities? What other crimes had he hidden? Preston's medical practice collapsed instantly. Patients fled. Other physicians demanded he be expelled from the medical association. And Preston knew exactly what had happened. Someone stole his journal. Someone gave it to his enemies. Someone was destroying him. In his jail cell that night, Preston wrote a letter to the 4 remaining conspirators. "We have been breached. Someone knows everything. Someone has evidence. They came for me first. They will come for all of us. You need to find who is doing this before they kill us." Because Preston understood something his partners had not yet grasped. This was not about money. The blackmail notes, the stolen documents, the journal delivered to authorities. This was about revenge. Someone wanted them exposed, humiliated, and destroyed, and that someone had just begun. The 5 conspirators met in emergency session 3 nights later, Hartwell's study. But now there were only 4. Preston was in jail awaiting trial. Charles Ashford looked exhausted, jumping at every sound. Thomas Wickham could barely hold his brandy glass. His hands shook so badly. Jonathan Vanderholm sat rigid and silent, those pale blue eyes darting between his partners. And Hartwell tried to maintain control, but even he looked shaken. "Someone knows," Hartwell said. "Someone has penetrated our security. They have documents, records, evidence. They killed Charles's brother. They arrested Samuel. They are hunting us. We need to determine who and eliminate them immediately." Charles Ashford slammed his fist on the desk. "How did they get into my office? How did they know where I keep my files? Who told them about Margaret?" Wickham added his own paranoia. "They know about my cases, too. I found a note in my office yesterday. Same threat, same demand for money. Someone is tracking all of us." Vanderholm spoke for the first time. "What if it is not an outsider? What if it is one of us?" They all turned to stare at him. Vanderholm continued. "Think about it. Who else would know where we keep records? Who else would have access to our offices? What if Samuel kept evidence against us, and now that he is in jail, he is using it for leverage? Or what if Peter Ashford was not an addict? What if Charles killed his own brother to consolidate control? Or what if Marcus is eliminating everyone to keep Eleanor's inheritance for himself?" The room exploded. Charles lunged at Vanderholm. Wickham grabbed Charles and pulled him back. Hartwell shouted for order. The conspiracy was fracturing exactly as Elias planned. And Elias watched all of it from his corner, holding a tray of drinks that no one had touched. He saw the fear in their eyes, saw the suspicion poisoning their alliance, saw them turning on each other like wolves starving in winter. And he knew that the next phase would be easier, because frightened men made mistakes. And when they made mistakes, Elias would be there, watching, waiting, ready to turn those mistakes into weapons that would destroy them all. Thomas Wickham's tongue hung black and swollen from his mouth like a rotted fruit. His eyes bulged from their sockets, bloodshot and glassy, staring at nothing. The rope around his neck had cut so deep it disappeared into folds of purple flesh. But those were not the details that made the police officers vomit when they entered Wickham's law office on the morning of June 3rd, 1840. What emptied their stomachs were the 7 letters carved into Wickham's chest. Traitor, cut deep enough to expose white bone beneath blackened blood. and on the desk below the hanging corpse, arranged in a perfect circle, documents, forged deeds, falsified court records, stolen properties, evidence displayed like an accusation from hell. Charles Ashford killed Thomas Wickham, but Charles believed he had good reason. 2 weeks earlier, on May 20th, Ashford received a letter supposedly from Wickham. The letter was in Wickham's handwriting, signed with Wickham's signature, sealed with Wickham's wax stamp. It read, "Charles, I can no longer participate in this conspiracy. Samuel's arrest has shown me we will all be destroyed. I have decided to cooperate with authorities and provide evidence against you, Marcus, and Jonathan in exchange for immunity. This is the only way to save myself. I suggest you consider the same before Hartwell eliminates all of us to protect himself. Your former partner, Thomas Wickham." The letter was a forgery. Elias had spent 3 months practicing Wickham's handwriting by copying stolen documents, had stolen Wickham's wax seal during a previous break-in, had even aged the paper with tea to make it look handled. The forgery was perfect. Charles Ashford never suspected. His paranoia had been growing since his brother Peter's death. He suspected his partners, suspected everyone, and now he had proof that Wickham was betraying them. But Ashford did not confront Wickham, did not tell Hartwell or Vanderholm. He decided to handle it himself, to send a message about what happened to traitors. June 2nd, 11:30 at night. Ashford stood across the street from Wickham's law office, watching lamplight flicker in the second-floor windows. Wickham was working late again, reviewing case files, preparing arguments. Ashford had been watching for 3 days, knew that Wickham always left between midnight and 1 in the morning, that the building was empty except for Wickham, that the front door was kept unlocked because Wickham was paranoid about fire and wanted multiple escape routes. Ashford crossed the street, tried the door, unlocked. He entered quietly, climbed the stairs, pushed open the office door. Wickham sat at his desk surrounded by papers, a lamp burning beside him, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked up when the door opened, saw Ashford. His nervous face twisted into confusion. "Charles, what are you doing here at this hour?" Ashford closed the door behind him, locked it, walked slowly toward the desk. "I received your letter, Thomas." Wickham set down his whiskey glass. "What letter?" Ashford pulled the forged confession from his coat pocket and threw it on the desk. "This letter, where you confess to betraying all of us, where you admit planning to provide evidence to authorities." Wickham picked up the letter, read it. His hand started shaking. "Charles, this is not my handwriting. I never wrote this. This is a forgery. Someone is trying to turn us against each other." Ashford laughed, a harsh sound with no humor. "Your handwriting, your seal, your signature." "Do you think I am stupid, Thomas?" Wickham stood backing away from the desk. "I swear to you, Charles, I never wrote this. Someone forged it. Someone wants us to kill each other so they can escape. Can you not see? This is a trap. We need to tell Marcus immediately. We need to warn Jonathan." Ashford grabbed Wickham by the throat, shoved him against the wall. Documents scattered across the floor. The lamp flickered. "You will not warn anyone, you traitorous bastard." Wickham clawed at Ashford's hands, gasping for air. His fingernails drew blood from Ashford's face, 4 deep scratches across his left cheek. Ashford roared in pain but squeezed harder. Wickham kicked at him, knocked over the desk chair. They crashed into the bookshelf. Books tumbled down around them. Wickham was smaller, weaker. His struggles grew frantic. His face turned red. then purple. His eyes bulged, his tongue pushed out between his teeth. But Ashford did not strangle him to death. He had something else planned. He dragged Wickham to the center of the room where a ceiling beam ran overhead. From his coat he pulled a rope, already prepared with a noose. Wickham saw it, and his eyes went wide with terror. He tried to scream but could not force sound through his damaged throat. Only a wet, rasping wheeze. Ashford looped the rope over the beam, forced the noose around Wickham's neck. Then he dragged a chair over, made Wickham stand on it. Wickham's legs shook so badly the chair rattled against the floor. "Please," he croaked, "please, Charles. I have a wife, children." Ashford kicked the chair out from under him. Wickham dropped. The rope snapped taut. His body jerked and swung. His legs kicked wildly, searching for ground that was not there. His hands clawed at the rope around his neck. His face turned from purple to black. His tongue swelled and pushed from his mouth. Urine soaked his pants and dripped onto the floor below. The kicking slowed, became twitches, then stopped. Ashford watched the entire time, watched until Wickham's eyes glazed over and his body hung limp and still. Then Ashford pulled out his knife. He grabbed Wickham's shirt and tore it open, pressed the blade against Wickham's chest, and began to carve. Traitor. 7 letters, each one cut deep, blood running in thick streams, exposing muscle and bone. Ashford carved with methodical precision, his face emotionless, his hands steady despite the blood coating them. When he finished, he wiped the knife on Wickham's pants. Then he went to the desk, gathered all of Wickham's incriminating documents, the forged deeds, the false court records, arranged them in a perfect circle on the desk beneath the hanging body. A message for anyone who found this scene. This is what happens to men who betray their partners. But Ashford made mistakes. Bloody footprints led from the body to the door. The scratches on his face bled steadily. And he left the forged letter on the desk, believing it was genuine evidence of Wickham's treachery. He locked the office door when he left, went home, washed the blood from his hands and face, burned his clothes, and waited for someone to discover the body. A cleaning woman found Wickham the next morning. Her screams brought police running. Within hours, Charleston knew that Thomas Wickham had been murdered, hanged in his own office, mutilated. The investigation moved quickly. Police found the bloody footprints, matched them to a specific boot type, found witnesses who saw Charles Ashford leaving the area near midnight, examined the scratches on Ashford's face, which matched skin found under Wickham's fingernails, and the forged letter, which a handwriting expert declared a fake within 2 days. Charles Ashford was arrested on June 5th while eating breakfast with his wife. He protested, claimed Wickham's death was suicide, insisted the letter was real, that Wickham had betrayed them all. But evidence does not lie. Blood matches. Footprints match. Skin under fingernails matches. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Guilty of murder in the first degree. Judge sentenced him to death by hanging. Execution scheduled for July 10th. Elias attended the sentencing, stood in the back of the courtroom holding a tray even though no one had asked him to serve anything. Charles Ashford sat in the defendant's chair listening to the judge pronounce his doom. And then Ashford turned his head, looked directly at Elias. Their eyes met across the crowded room. For just one moment, understanding passed between them. Ashford's mouth opened. He started to speak, to point, to identify the deaf slave as somehow connected to everything. But guards grabbed him and dragged him from the courtroom before words could form. Elias turned and walked out into Charleston's morning sun. 2 conspirators dead, 2 awaiting execution, 3 remaining. Jonathan Vanderholm was next, and Vanderholm would not die quietly. Dr. Marcus Hartwell understood he was being hunted. 4 partners dead or arrested within 3 months. The pattern was unmistakable. Someone had studied them, learned their secrets, turned them against each other, and now only Hartwell remained. He stopped seeing patients, stopped going to his medical office, hired 4 armed guards to watch his mansion day and night, installed new locks on every door and window, slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow, and searched desperately for the enemy who was destroying everything he had built. He never thought to suspect the deaf slave standing silently in the corner of his study. Elias watched Hartwell unravel, watched him pace the study for hours, muttering to himself about conspiracies and betrayals, watched him drink brandy at 10 in the morning, watched him jump at every noise, every shadow, every unexpected footstep. Hartwell was terrified, and Elias felt nothing but cold satisfaction. This man had poisoned his own wife, had murdered at least 6 innocent people, had dismissed Elias as furniture, as less than human, as something that could witness evil and never speak. Now Hartwell would learn the cost of that arrogance. But first, Elias needed Hartwell to suffer one more loss. The woman Hartwell planned to marry, Catherine Winters. She was 23 years old, beautiful, from a poor family desperate for money. Hartwell had been courting her since before Eleanor died, had promised marriage and wealth. Catherine accepted because she had no choice. Her father owed gambling debts he could not repay. Hartwell had purchased those debts and offered Catherine a deal. Marry me and your father's obligations disappear. Refuse, and I will have him imprisoned for fraud. Catherine agreed. The wedding was scheduled for August 15, 1840. Elias decided Catherine would not survive to see her wedding day. Not because Catherine was evil. She was not. She was simply a young woman trapped by circumstance. But her death would serve a purpose. It would destroy Hartwell completely, would show him that no one he cared about was safe, would make him understand that the hunter had taken everything from him before taking his life. July 20th. 3 weeks before the wedding, Catherine visited Hartwell's mansion for afternoon tea. Hartwell entertained her in the parlor. Elias served them tea and small cakes. Hartwell barely noticed him. Catherine smiled at Elias kindly, one of the few white people who ever looked at him as if he were human. Elias put arsenic in her tea. Not enough to kill her immediately, just enough to make her sick. She drank it while chatting with Hartwell about wedding preparations, flowers, music, guest lists. 30 minutes later, she complained of stomach cramps. Hartwell dismissed it as nervousness. Catherine went home. By evening, she was vomiting. By midnight, her family called for a doctor. The doctor examined her and diagnosed food poisoning, prescribed rest and liquids. Catherine spent the next 3 days in bed growing weaker. Her skin turned gray. Her hair fell out in clumps. She could not keep food down. The doctor revised his diagnosis, some kind of wasting illness, possibly consumption. Hartwell visited her every day, sat beside her bed, held her hand, promised she would recover. On July 25th, Catherine died. Her mother was holding her when it happened. Catherine's body seized, her back arched, her eyes rolled back, blood leaked from her nose and mouth. She made a choking sound and then went still. Hartwell arrived 30 minutes later, found Catherine's mother sobbing over the body. Hartwell knelt beside the bed, touched Catherine's cold face, and something inside him broke. He did not cry. He simply sat there staring at the corpse with empty eyes. Then he stood, walked out of the house, went home, locked himself in his study, and did not emerge for 2 days. When Hartwell finally came out of the study, he looked 10 years older. His face was haggard, his eyes sunken and bloodshot. His hands shook constantly. He called his guards together. "I know who is doing this," he said. "Someone close to me, someone with access to my house, someone who has been watching us all along." The guards waited for him to identify the culprit. Hartwell looked at each of them in turn. "I trust none of you," he said. "You are all dismissed. Leave my property immediately." The guards protested. Who would protect him? Hartwell pulled out his pistol. "I will protect myself. Now leave before I shoot you for conspiracy." The guards left. Hartwell was now alone in his mansion, except for his cook, his maid, and Elias. That night Hartwell called them all into the study. He looked at the cook, an elderly woman who had worked for him for 15 years. "Did you poison Catherine?" The cook gasped. "No, sir, I would never." Hartwell pointed his pistol at her. "Swear it on your life." The cook swore. Hartwell lowered the gun and turned to the maid, a young girl barely 16. "Did you poison Catherine?" The maid started crying. "No, master, please, I never hurt anyone." Hartwell stared at her for a long moment, then waved her away. Finally, he turned to Elias. "You, the deaf one, come here." Elias approached slowly. Hartwell studied his face. "You have been in my house for 2 years, served at every meeting, stood in every room, seen everything, but you are deaf and mute, cannot hear, cannot speak, cannot understand." Hartwell grabbed Elias by the jaw, forced his face up. "I should kill you anyway, just to be certain. But what threat is a deaf slave? You are nothing, less than nothing." Hartwell released him. "Get out of my sight." Elias bowed and left the room. Behind him, Hartwell slumped in his chair and put the pistol to his own head, held it there for a full minute, then lowered it and poured another glass of brandy. Elias knew the time had come. Hartwell was isolated, paranoid, broken. Now Elias would reveal himself, would make Hartwell understand exactly who had destroyed him, and would make Hartwell beg for death before granting it. That night Elias waited until Hartwell fell asleep in his study, drunk on brandy and exhaustion. Then Elias entered, locked the door behind him, walked to Hartwell's desk, and began making noise. He knocked books off the shelf, kicked the desk chair, slammed drawers. Hartwell woke with a start, grabbed for his pistol, saw Elias standing in the center of the room. "You! What are you doing? Get out!" Elias did not move, did not bow, did not pretend to be deaf. He simply stared at Hartwell with cold intelligence in his eyes. Hartwell's confusion turned to unease. He raised the pistol. "I said, get out." Elias reached into his shirt and pulled out a journal, the journal he had been keeping for 2 years. He threw it onto the desk in front of Hartwell. Hartwell picked it up, opened it, saw pages filled with names, dates, details. Edward Beaumont, poisoned March 10th, 1838. Robert Chen, strychnine, November 12th, 1838. Eleanor Hartwell, arsenic, 6-month administration, ending March 19th, 1840. Hartwell's face went white. He flipped through more pages, saw descriptions of every crime the conspiracy had committed, saw documentation of every murder, every theft, every fraud, all written in crude but clear handwriting. "You wrote this," Hartwell whispered, "but you cannot write. You are deaf. You are illiterate." Elias pulled out a second document, the forged letter that had set Charles Ashford against Thomas Wickham. Hartwell stared at it. "This letter. This started everything. You forged this. You made Charles kill Thomas." Elias nodded slowly. Hartwell's hands shook so badly the papers rustled. How long? How long have you been able to understand us? Elias held up 2 fingers. 2 years. The entire time. Hartwell stood abruptly. His chair fell backward. You heard everything, every meeting, every confession, every plan, and you used it to destroy us? Elias reached into his shirt again, pulled out one more document, a written statement addressed to Charleston authorities. I, Elias, slave property of Dr. Marcus Hartwell, hereby confess to the following murders. Peter Ashford, strangled May 15, 1840. Catherine Winters, poisoned with arsenic, July 20, 1840. I committed these murders as revenge for crimes committed by Dr. Hartwell and his associates. I understand the penalty for killing white people is death. I accept this penalty, but I will not die until Dr. Marcus Hartwell confesses his own crimes publicly. And I will make certain that confession happens. Signed, Elias. Hartwell read the confession, his face twisted between rage and terror. You think I will confess? You think authorities will believe a slave over a respected physician? Elias walked to the desk, picked up a pen, wrote quickly on a blank piece of paper, then turned it so Hartwell could read. They will believe my journal. They will investigate. They will exhume Eleanor's body. They will find arsenic. They will interview families of your victims. They will discover everything. You are already finished. The only choice you have is whether you die quickly or slowly. Confess, and I will kill you fast. Refuse, and I will turn this journal over to police and let them execute you after a public trial that exposes every detail of your crimes. Hartwell raised the pistol, pointed it at Elias's head. I could just shoot you now. Kill you and burn that journal. Elias wrote again. You could, but I already made copies, gave one to someone who will deliver it to authorities if I do not return by morning. Kill me, and you guarantee your exposure. Let me live, and we can negotiate. Hartwell's hand trembled. The pistol wavered. I have a third option. I shoot you and then shoot myself. We both die. No one gets justice. Elias smiled, the first expression Hartwell had ever seen on his face. It was not a kind smile. He wrote one final message. You are too much of a coward to kill yourself. You held that gun to your head earlier tonight. You lowered it. You want to live. You want to escape. But there is no escape. I have spent 2 years planning your destruction, and nothing you do now will change what happens next. Hartwell stared at the message, at the journal, at the confession, at Elias's calm, cold face, and something inside him collapsed. The pistol dropped from his hand. He sank to his knees. Please, he whispered, please, I will give you anything. Money, freedom. I can forge papers declaring you a free man. You can leave Charleston, start a new life. Just spare me. Let me live. Elias picked up the pen one more time, wrote slowly, deliberately. You killed Eleanor. You mocked her as she died. You called her useful only in death. You are going to die the same way she did, slowly, poisoned, and I will watch you suffer every moment. Hartwell looked up at Elias with dawning horror. The brandy, he whispered. You have been poisoning me. How long? Elias held up his hand, spread his fingers. 5 days, since Catherine died. Same poison you gave Eleanor. Arsenic. Hartwell vomited onto the floor, clawed at his throat. How much did you give me? Am I already dying? Elias nodded. Hartwell tried to stand, collapsed, crawled toward the door. It was locked. He pounded on it, screamed for help. But there was no one to hear. The cook and maid had left that evening after Hartwell's paranoid interrogation. The guards were gone. The house was empty except for Hartwell and Elias. Elias stood over Hartwell's crawling form, watched him struggle, watched him gasp and vomit, watched his skin turn gray and his hair start falling out, watched him suffer exactly as Eleanor had suffered. And Elias felt satisfaction deeper than anything he had known. Not joy, not happiness, simply the cold certainty that justice was being served. Hartwell crawled to his desk, pulled himself up, found the pistol, raised it toward Elias. His hand shook so badly he could barely hold it. "I will kill you," he gasped. "Even if I die, I will take you with me." He pulled the trigger. The gun clicked empty. Elias had removed the bullets hours ago. Hartwell dropped the useless weapon, slumped against the desk. He was crying now. "Please, please kill me quickly. I am begging you." Elias shook his head, walked to the door, unlocked it, turned back one last time. Hartwell looked at him with desperate hope. "You are leaving? You will get help?" Elias wrote one final message and left it on the desk where Hartwell could see it. "You have 3 more days, same as Eleanor. I will visit each day to watch you die. And when it is finished, I will turn myself in to authorities. I will tell them everything, and I will hang knowing that you suffered first." Elias left the study, closed the door behind him, locked it from the outside. Hartwell's screams followed him down the hallway. Elias walked into Charleston's night. Tomorrow he would return, and the day after, and the day after that, until Marcus Hartwell was dead. And then Elias's revenge would be complete.